Hello, everyone. It is me, your commissioner, and always I have with me Noel McCullough. How are you, Noel?
I'm doing well, and yourself?
I'm doing pretty well tonight. I think after our kind of sad podcast last week, I'm very much looking forward to getting back into our normal, silly, stupid selves. So let's get into our normal, silly, stupid selves, starting off with the MVP, the most valuable team, which far and away goes to Ben Griffiths, who absolutely crushed Canfield this week, 186.7 to 117. Ben is kicking ass this year, 7-3. He's atop the Atlantic Conference, the very challenging Atlantic Conference, and good for him. Molly's not too far behind, but Ben is still number one. And at 7-3, it's hard for me not to expect to see him in the players' circle, or the winners' circle. Is the worst case scenario for him is 7-5, which is pretty much a record that's guaranteed to get you into at least a shout of the winner's circle. Usually 8-4 is the record you need to get in. So at any rate, congratulations, Ben. And also congratulations on MVP, Ezekiel Elliott, who is just unbelievable. He has not had a single-digit game this season. The worst game he's had was 17 points. That was his worst. In fact, this last week was his best, 58. He ran 21 times, 114 yards, 2 touchdowns on the ground, and then 2 receptions for 95 yards and a touchdown. So this dude is rocking it. Unless something happens to Ezekiel Elliott, get out of Ben's way. He's going to fucking mow you over. So congratulations, Ben, MVT, MVP. Noel, who's shitty this week?
Well, I had a tough time finding somebody that kind of did something stupid or said something dumb. So we're doing some shit heads of the week this week because, but they're all associated. I don't know if you all saw, but after previously spending the past few weeks saying that it's not Case Keenum's fault the offense is doing nothing for the Rams and saying he has no intention of starting Jared Goff, Jeff Fisher announced that he will start Jared Goff for the first time this coming Sunday.
Oh, my God.
And what earns the Rams, the people who run the Rams, which is ferret head wearer and also a man who's afraid to go to the bathroom around the people, Stan Kroenke, their GM, who I tried to look up his history. He doesn't really have much of one, Les Snead. And, of course, 80s douchebag from a bad movie villain, Jeff Fisher. And kind of why these guys get shitheads of the week is Kroenke not only, left basically he burnt he burnt the bridges on his way out of town with St. Louis, but also then kind of salted the ground and wrote a letter calling them bad fans because they wouldn't give him money and show up to his games, which were all shitty. But then Les Snead get this. I hate to revisit this, but in the trade that kind of made Les Snead well known originally, these are the players that he got. In the first round, Michael Brockers. Also in the first round, Janoris Jenkins. Also in the first round, Janoris Jenkins is the second round pick. Alec Ogletree. The first round pick was also Greg Robinson. The other players they got, as I said, Janoris Jenkins, Isaiah Peed, Rokevius Watkins, Stedman Bailey, and Zach Stacy. Of those players, Michael Brockers is a solid defensive tackle, probably one of the, I'd say, top 20% in the league. Janoris Jenkins, no longer on the team. They decided not to re-sign him after he came up for free agency. Isaiah Peed is out of the league now after he was very recently in a car crash, which probably ended his career. Rokevius Watkins out of the league. Alec Ogletree, solid middle linebacker. Stedman Bailey was a contributing guy on special teams last year until he unfortunately got shot in the head, and he's trying to come back, but no one knows. Zach Stacy out of the league. Greg Robinson, an extreme disappointment considering he was the second overall pick in 2014. And now we get to Jeff Fisher. They make this huge trade to get Jared Goff, and the thought is that Goff is the most pro-ready prospect of any of the top-flight quarterbacks from last year's draft class. So you think, hey, we're just going to plug and play this guy because he didn't have a whole lot of upside. The thought was between if you're going to go with the Ginger Nightmare, who I can't remember his name right now off the top of my head, in Philadelphia, he had
Carson Wentz.
Carson Wentz, thank you. Carson Wentz was the prospect. He had size, he has the arm, he's got the athleticism, but was he pro ready? No one really knew. But God damn it, Jared Goff was supposed to be the guy that could come in and play. If you think back to the draft where it was, who do you take first? Vince Young, or do you take oh my gosh, I'm drawing all sorts of blanks tonight. The guy from USC, Matt
Leinart.
Matt Leinart, thank you. Brain farts early. Matt Leinart was, had a whole bunch of success in college, was polished, but didn't have a whole lot of upside coming to the pros. As were Vince Young and Jay Cutler in the same draft, were thought of as more of prospects. They had a huge amount of upside, but it makes them some time to get there. So when Jared Goff got in the league and they kept Case Keenum and saying that Jared Goff would not come in because he wasn't ready, and now the rumor is he still isn't ready, but you're starting him because I think Jeff Fisher wants to save his job. Mr. 7-9 might not even go 7-9 this season. It's rumored that before the season, Kroenke offered Fisher and Les Snead extensions, and both of them turned them down because they wanted more money. And I don't even know who their offensive coordinator is. He is awful. I can post a link that shows just how bad his play calling is. They never do anything deep. And the fact that they cannot develop an offensive line to save their lives, which is just killing any running backs they put back there this season. They are my shitheads of the week, if not the whole season, because I'm sure Courtney would put them up there for that.
Especially with the whole Zach Stacy thing. I remember. Yeah, he coming out of Vanderbilt University. He's got a hell of an education, but he had a very shitty NFL career, so that I'm sure Courtney would not appreciate what basically Jeff Fisher ran him out of the league. So thank you, Noel. That is a very apt shithead of the week. Jeff Fisher is just a shithead. I'm going to post a picture of him from the 80s, and I think it's the 80s. It might even be the 70s. It's pretty – that stash – there's no way that he hasn't raped somebody with that mustache. So we're going to just keep on moving along here before it
he
gets
also
down to
coaches as if it's still the 1980s. So there's that.
Sweet. I bet his favorite video game is Tecmo Bowl. Anyways, let's go to the review of the week. And I have some good and bad news to report. The bad news for Brandon is that he lost this week. And he had a good game, 133. But Tyler had a better game, 161. The good news is Brandon had his son tonight. Congratulations to you, Brandon, on the birth of your child. Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Noel. That is outstanding. We're all very happy and very proud of your family. Best of luck to you and your little one. And Mama, I hope you guys are all well. So back to the game here. He had a great game with Larry Fitzgerald, and that was about it. The Texans had a surprise upside game against – that's not surprising, I suppose, against Jacksonville, but 19 points for decent defense is pretty good, especially a defense that does not have and is used to having J.J. Watt. Jay Ajayi kind of fell back a little bit to earth this week at 16 points, and A.J. Green is still a consistent performer, as well as Devonta Freeman. They put up, as I said, he put up a good week. 133.9 is certainly enough to be a contender every week. However, Jake, I keep saying that. Tyler just threw it down. Roethlisberger came back in a huge way this week, 41 points for him. And despite Christy Michael, who has been dropped, and I believe has been picked up already by another team. Thank you. Oh, man. The Packers, as if they don't have enough running back troubles as is. Julian Edelman had a good game, 14 points. Delaney Walker was the real standout on his team as for a positional in that positional sense, I should say. 29 points for tight end. That's pretty damn good. But his best player was Ryan Matthews, who had 44 points. He got that on the back of 109 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground, and just as a little kiss, got 30 points on 30 yards on 2 receptions as well. So good job, Tyler. Great week. This keeps you alive. Talking about who needs to win to stay alive, and you are one of those teams. Believe it or not, Georgia's in at home. I'm not going to sing that whole thing. There is not a team that's been mathematically eliminated from the playoffs yet. When I find that fascinating because we only have 2 games left, and by this point, there's usually an 8-2 team or a 9-1 team, clearly there's a person who's going to say, all right, this person's in. Even Courtney at 3-7 still mathematically has a chance to make it to the playoffs. There isn't enough to keep her out at the moment because there are 4 teams that have a 5-5 record. So a third of the league has a 5-5 record, and 2 teams have a 4-6 record. So I can't believe I'm saying this. It's still anybody's game anybody's season to make the playoffs. It's pretty clear that Ben and Molly are going to make it at 7-3. I'd be surprised if they didn't, but kudos to Jake's Protein Shakes for hanging in there and giving handing Brandon a loss and staying in the match. Okay, Noel, have fun with my game.
All right. Well, congratulations on your win here, Mike. It's a very solid win, if not all that flashy.
Thank you.
Tom Brady had, a below standard game for himself. Cam Chancellor came back for Seattle, and that defense, especially once they get Michael Bennett back, that defense looks like they're clicking on all cylinders again. So not too surprised, but you would think that, Tom Brady, 24 points against Seattle would happen. To Charlie's side, Aaron Rodgers had a very good day, although a lot of that came, albeit in garbage time. And as I pointed out last week, Mike, you hamstrung him in 2 ways. Jordy Nelson in a big way, who had 32 points. Ty Montgomery, who I think with that sickle cell trait diagnosis, they just don't know what to do with him. So he only had 6 points, but still, that's a good way to kind of keep whatever damage Aaron Rodgers was going to do to you to a minimum. And then Devontae Booker, solid 18 points. Greg Olsen, again, another kind of down week at 8 points. But then again, Gronkowski had a down week. Also got lit the fuck up and is going to miss next week, most likely with this week, with a punctured lung. Jamison Crowder, another solid, just quiet week with 14 points. Sterling Shepard had he tried for you, Charlie, with 15. TJ Yeldon, again, kind of lost in the shuffle. And then, Mike, really your money players here, apart from Jordy Nelson, were the Jets, D and special teams going up against that just god-awful Rams offense. So that was a great play there. And then Dustin Hopkins, 16 points from a kicker. That is amazing when that happens. So not a flashy win for you here, Mike, but sure it's something you'll take. And it's something I'll take as well because it helps me out in the playoffs. No offense, Charlie, but yeah, good win, Mike.
Yeah. And, fuck you, Charlie.
But then again, as I said, the Packers got fucking killed, and that's part of what lost Charlie the game with the Packers defense giving him -4 points. Oh, God.
That sucks.
But at least Mike McCarthy kicked 2 field goals when they needed touchdowns because that's what he does.
I asked you this earlier in the season during a podcast. How does he still have a job? Like, what the fuck? The Packers are just on a steep decline right now.
It's kind of the same reason that Shanahan hung on for so long. He kept making the playoffs. He had, well, at least in Shanahan's case, he had 2 Super Bowls under his belt. McCarthy's got the 1. And, they could very well make the playoffs this season because we'll discuss this later, but Minnesota is just – they're dealing with a shitload of bad luck, like an offensive line that can't stay healthy. And there's not much they can do about that. So it's a very winnable division, but McCarthy he's been calling the same play since 2010, and he just seems to think that if his players would execute, he's so smart that his game plan will win all the time, and that's just not how the NFL works. It's it's a game of parity, and every year you have to. I was just thinking about this morning with from Moneyball, where Brad Pitt's character goes, "What does he say? Adapt or die," and claps. That's what Mike McCarthy is not doing, and we're just watching the Packers die in front of our eyes. It's sad.
I'm sorry, Packers. We still love you. Sort of. I guess Courtney doesn't. But anyways.
That's fair.
That's fair. All right, thank you, Noel. Is there anything else you want to say, or should we move on to, ironically, her game?
Let's move on.
Let's do. So this was a not a great week for Courtney. She struggled, to say the least. She got less than 100 points, which is not what she needed. As we said last week, she really needed to win out to stay as a ultra stiff competitor going into the last 3 games of the season. But now going into the last 2, it's do or die. She has to win or face elimination. So she struggled in the sense that she didn't really suffer too many, like, oh my God, what the fuck performances. Randall Cobb got 7 points, the Chargers D got 8, and Goskowski got 6, which is unexpected for him, but not for a kicker per se. I think the average kicker scores about 7 or 8 points, so really not too far off. What really killed her was the ginger you were talking about earlier, Noel, Carson Wentz. Did not have a good week. He got 14 points, which is the third worst, showing of the season he's had. So not a great week for him. Todd Gurley has just been disappointing. 13 points out of him. He's not even in the top 12, which would make him an RB1 type guy. And for the type of money she threw down in the draft, you would hope he would be the RB1. So not a great game by him. Kelvin Benjamin is still kind of coming back with a struggling Panthers offense. Jason Witten, not too bad at 22 points, and DT of our beloved Broncos had a pretty darn good week, 22 points, just 94. That's not going to win you games. On the converse, Vanessa threw down 163 points on the back of DeMarco Murray, who put down 50.2. This dude is a stud. I was watching his highlights, and he's amazing. He, like Ezekiel Elliott, has not had a single-digit game in 2016. He's the number 1 RB overall, 33 points, which makes him as valuable as a quarterback, but she's throwing him in the running back position. He's just great. He got 123 yards on 17 attempts, 1 touchdown, and 2 more catches for 33 yards, so 50 points for that guy. And the reason why he scored so many on not a ton of production was he had some big runs during the week, and there was a hole in the line, and he just boop boop doop 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 right on through. So good job, Vanny. That's a great game. Congratulations on your win. As I said, although Courtney is at the bottom of the Mountain Conference at 3-7, she's not out of it yet. Vanny improves her chances in the Pacific Conference at 4-6. She's one of 3 teams shared with Noel and Kenfield at 4-6. If Charlie loses out, which is why we were saying "fuck you, Charlie" earlier, just for Noel's sake, I'm not actually, Charlie. We have no beef otherwise. It was just for that joke. If Charlie loses out and Vanny or Noel or Kenfield win, it could be anybody's conference at this point. In fact, all of these conferences can be anybody's conference at this point. There's no mathematical elimination. Anybody can win any conference. So watch very closely as these last 2 weeks unfold. It's going to be pretty damn important. So Vanessa's hanging in there. 2nd place in the Pacific Conference. Courtney, although last in the Mountain Conference, is still in it. Let's go
if I
to
can chime
Noel.
in just on Vanessa's sake here. So Vanessa is leading just barely the league in points for, but she has the most points against, and it's not even close, with 1,501.3. That is ridiculous. That she's putting up the best points for, and how is it even possible that she has that many points against her? Like that, I think that kind of shows why her record is the way it is. She's consistently had good showings, but she's gone up against some teams that have had better showings from time to time. That is just crazy. So I just wanted to mention that because I just saw that in the stats and thought that was crazy.
I've never tracked this stat, and thank you for your insights there. I've never tracked this stat, Noel, but Vanessa has faced 2 and lost 2 games where her opponents have put up more than 200 points. In week 3, she lost to Ben, who put up 222 points. And in week 5, she lost to yours truly with 203 points. So Vanessa, except for this last week where Courtney did not put up 100 points, has every single other week the score has been at least over 100 points. Here's what her opponents have scored: 158, 114, 222, 143, 203, 134, 159, 110, 160, and then 94. So Vanessa's had a real rough go of it. What's most frustrating about that for her, I'm sure, is what you said, Noel. It's so hard when you have a good week, but the other team just has a better week. That's so frustrating. The only thing that the thing that encapsulates that the best, the most, the epitome of that is the EB award, where you're the number 2 team and you would have beaten everybody else except the one team you played, which was the number 1 team, the MVT. So Vanny certainly has had a steep mountain to climb this year, unfortunately for her, but she's hanging in there. That one win is helping out, and your 2-game winning streak right behind her, Noel, is nipping at her heels. So you're keeping her honest there. So yeah, Vanny, even though you may not make it very far and your stats may not show it from a win-loss perspective, you do have one of the best teams in the Mile High Champions League, just off the concept that you are kicking some serious ass. So let's go on to the Titletown Warriors. Who owns them, Noel?
That would be some douchebag in Seattle.
Oh, man. I got to figure that out. I've heard of this douchebag in Seattle, but, man, I'll think about it. I'll think of it. I'll think of this guy's name. Anyways, he had a good week. He's dumb beard guy had 161 points versus no beard guy who had 122. And back to well, not serious, but more serious. You had a great week, Noel. Every one of your players performed well. Even Nick Novak at 8 points is not a disappointment. Everyone did well. I guess the most quote-unquote disappointing thing would be Emmanuel Sanders only getting you 10 points. But Le'Veon Bell made it up with 39. Russell Wilson at 36. Melvin Gordon at 25 is still kicking ass for you. We were texting earlier today, listeners, and Noel said, well, I'm going to be out without Melvin Gordon this week, which sucks because Melvin Gordon has been really kicking ass. He's the number 4 running back through 10 weeks, and he, like everyone else we've talked about that we've been highlighting, has not had a single-digit game. So Melvin is doing really well, and he's kicking ass for Noel. Josh had a pretty good week. He really did. At 122 points, that's nothing to scoff at. What sucks, DeAndre Hopkins in a Brock Osweiler offense has just completely fallen off the map. He's a 38th ranked wide receiver, which doesn't even warrant a flex position at this point. He's putting up 12 points per week, which is about tight end position. So it's really, Josh is really struggling with DeAndre Hopkins here, and I feel him because it sucks when you have players underperform expectations. Carlos Hyde, the same thing, 2 points. 2 points. Noel, if I said Carlos Hyde got 2 points, how many rushing attempts do you think he would have had?
2.
I think you're correct. I think when you get a low single-digit score, you figure, oh, maybe he went in for a couple and maybe got hurt or something. Nope. 13 attempts. Jesus. 13 attempts and 14 yards. What the hell? I mean, it's just a really bad game for Carlos Hyde. And when against the Arizona defense, which I suppose is pretty damn good, they are the best against the running back, but that's just pretty amazing. They held San Francisco to 28 yards on the ground on 18 attempts. So Carlos had 13 of them, and some other 49er had the remaining 5, or maybe a couple other 49ers had the remaining 5. But 28 yards. That Cardinals run defense is stout. Only the Buffalo Bills with LaShawn McCoy and his shadiness were able to get over 100 yards, and they only ran for 132. So that's tough. Keep that in mind. If you're facing the Cardinals defense on the ground, highly consider a substitute player because they have been like the Great Wall of China, but in Phoenix this year. China. So sorry, Josh. This is a tough loss for you considering it's been 3 weeks. It's been a long time since you've had a win. You're going into this with a stellar, shining record, 5-2, but now you're even at 5-5. That's tough to deal with. However, given that you're 5-5 in the Atlantic Conference, it's not unexpected. It wouldn't be hard to say that you could win the conference, but I think with how far ahead Ben is on points, am I looking at the right team? I was, yeah. He's about 90 points ahead of you on there, so you'd really have to have 2 great wins with a lot of points and Ben not have as great of a week. He's doing pretty damn good, though, at 1475. That means he's putting up 147 points per week. So watch out for Ben. He might be the Mile High champion this year, and this would be the first time in 11 years that he's won it. So not that I'm cheering for him, because Ben, like this bearded guy in Seattle, is also a douchebag. And not that I wish him ill, but I want to destroy him on the field of battle. So congratulations, Ben, on another fantastic victory. Apologies to Josh on another loss for you. Let's go on to the last two game. Noel, take it away.
All right. So this was a relatively close game with Molly scoring 140.1 and Larson, again, grinding out with just what he can kind of scrape together out of the trash heap, 131.8. And this takes Molly to 7-3. And as you just talked about, nipping right at Ben's heels. The only difference is she's about 45 points behind as far as points for. Other than that, she's keeping up right there. And even then, good week, Cam Newton, 33.6. David Johnson, against San Francisco, I would have thought 32 points was a little low. Kind of disappointing week for Mike Evans. Cameron Brate, though, made up for it in spades. 21 points from a tight end whose name is Cameron Brate. I think you'll take that 10 times out of 10, not even 9 times out of 10. Gianni Bernard, I've suffered from this as well, Molly, where you never know, who's going to get the majority of the carries or the touches in the Cincinnati backfield. And also, I don't know what's wrong with Cincinnati's offense right now. For anybody watching today's game, they started off well, and then they kind of went to all these plays that didn't work and kept going with those, and it just kept not working for some reason. Then just kind of quiet game from Terrence West, solid game from Falcons defense. Matt Bryant, again, quietly one of the best kickers so far fantasy-wise in the league. And then to Larson Seaman, as I said, another feat of expert roster management here. Marcus Mariota, 35.8 points. Could have had more if the Packers just didn't give up all those points early and the Tennessee Titans were just kind of trying to run the ball out. And Mariota could have had a lot more because, Jesus Christ, that Packers defense. Jordan Howard had a good game with 22 points. Also, a lot of people had speculated that Jordan Howard suffered maybe a season-ending injury with the Achilles injury over the week. But he practiced a little bit today, so it looks like he's not done, and he should play on Sunday. But keep an eye on that, Larson. Steve Smith, as I said, I like that start. Zach Miller, 7 points, nothing to shake a fist at as far as tight end. Jarvis Landry, again, just a colossal disappointment, 11 points. Chris Ivory lost in the shuffle there in Jacksonville. Rams defense, great start. Brandon McManus, great start, 13 points. So great win for Molly, and you hate to call it a moral victory, but yet another. It took what he had with the luck he's had this season to make it close, but tough loss for Larson. But good job, buddy.
Yeah, seriously, I feel for you, Larson. It's you've had a rough go of things. At least you have a beautiful addition to your family, so there's certainly consolation in that. But yeah, he has done a tremendous job of setting a dumpster on fire with all the injuries and shit that he's had, but still being able to pull flaming garbage out and put it into his lineup and hopefully do pretty well. I am impressed with the Jordan Howard pickup. I had him, and then he started to fall off a cliff. I'm like, fuck this guy. And he's come back, and I'm like, fuck me. I wish I would have kept him. So anyways, all right, last game, Noel.
All right. So as you alluded to before, we've talked about just, another monster game out of Ben here, 186.7. And the majority of that, well, not the majority, but the plurality of that coming off of Ezekiel Elliott just killing it this season. He could very well hit 2,000 yards, which would be a rookie record, and worth basically every penny that the rest of us refuse to spend. And I think Ben looks very smart for doing so. And to make, I must, in all honesty, and just for the sake of having any credibility here, don't I look like a fucking jackass for telling Ben to not start the Buccaneers defensive / special teams for 37.5 points? Dear God, do I look stupid. I did text Ben about that. To Ken Field's side here, good game from Phillip Rivers, what you expect from Duke Johnson. Quincy Enunwa, but Ken Field would have done well to start Doug Baldwin, who looks like he's back, so that's good, but he's on his bench. Jimmy Graham, as we talked about in the preview from last week, Mike, just was probably set for a down game because Belichick was not going to get beat by him. Odell Beckham Jr. not putting up the solid numbers he did last year, but 25 is good, but not Odell Beckham Jr. as we expect. Quietly, Darren Sproles is doing very well. Chiefs defense, huge 21 points, 11 points from his kicker, very good, but it's just, I mean, it's impossible to overcome 58 points from one player, 31 points from another, and 37.5 points from your goddamn defense. The only downside I would say to Ben going forward is Alshon Jeffrey is suspended for the next 4 games, which makes him dead fantasy-wise. So, but as I said, that wouldn't matter with what Ezekiel Elliott has been doing. So great win, Ben. Kenfield, I think this should do better now with Doug Baldwin going in there, and maybe you might want to get rid of Quincy Enunwa. Not saying anything, but maybe you do. All right. Okay. Let's move on.
Okay, let's move on. And maybe you do want to drop him because nobody named Quincy should be in the NFL. Also, as you were going through that, Noel, I had noticed that Alshon Jeffrey is suspended for 4 games for violating the NFL's PED, or performance-enhancing drug policy. And I think his lawyers have a good defense in the fact that they say, there's no way he could be on performance-enhancing drugs. Have you seen his stats? He's playing so poorly. Hey, I'll be here all night.
I saw a good comment on Deadspin about that where it said, what an idiot. Does he not realize that him taking performance-enhancing drugs doesn't help out Jay Cutler?
Exactly. Oh, the poor Bears. They're one of those teams that you want to do well. They just don't. So at any rate, yes, let's go on before we just keep cracking jokes about Ashlon. Let's move on to the previews of the week. But before we do that, let's talk about the bye weeks. This week we have 4 with some fairly significant fantasy impact. We have the Atlanta Falcons, the Denver Broncos, the shitty New York Jets with Quincy Enunwa, and the San Diego Chargers. So sorry, Noel Melvin, you're going to have to find a replacement for him. They Melvined me. And by the way, for those of you who are unfamiliar with what we're talking about, Noel and I are discussing the fantastic movie Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, wherein the bad guy from Die Hard 2 plays the Grim Reaper, and he's explaining why he wasn't able to capture them or something.
Exactly.
And it's because they Melvined him. They pulled his underwear up, and boy, was it embarrassing for him. So at any rate, go watch that movie. If you don't own it, buy 30 copies and go find that scene where he just goes, they Melvined me. And now you'll know why Noel and I keep bringing that up. Okay, preview time. Let's look at this. The first game we're going to be looking at is the Doongivers at the Spartans, Kenfield and Brandon. I can't say much yet because there are 2 players on Kenfield's team on bye and Brandon without a defense. Oh, nope, and his kicker is on bye as well. So let's just look at the 2 teams in general and see what could go right and what could go wrong. Brandon, as we know, is perennial badassery in the fantasy football is unquestionable. He's 3rd overall, even with a 5-5 record. He's 3rd overall in the league, so he's certainly doing a pretty damn good job. So he's 3rd, by the way, because he's leading the Mountain Conference. If you look at Charlie has a better score, but Charlie's number 2 because Charlie, let's just put it this way. Molly with a 7-3 record is not number 2, even though she has a better record than Charlie because Charlie is winning the Pacific Conference. Whoever wins the conferences are 1, 2, and 3. After that, come 4, 5, and 6. So Brandon is the number 3 team overall because even with a 500 record, he is winning the Mountain Conference. Okay, now that we have that behind us. Looking at his team, he's going to sorely miss Devonta Freeman for sure. He's been putting up about 22 points a week. Most of the rest of his team is able to play. The only questionable person here is Larry Fitzgerald, who did not practice today, which is not a good sign for him to play against Minnesota on Sunday in the early game. So Brandon might have to find a replacement for Larry Fitzgerald. Now, he does have Stephon Diggs, who's been a real positive boost for him. So he's got enough there. And he's got the Giants defense sitting on his bench. So he's got He's got enough there to fill in the gaps. And based on the defense he's facing, should have a pretty good week. Kenfield, on the other hand, no. He's got to drop Quincy Enunwa. Phillip Rivers on bye, he can definitely keep. He's the number 6 quarterback. He's got Carson Palmer on the sidelines waiting in the wings. However, he's the number 20 quarterback overall. So that's not starter worthy. You'd want one of the top 12 quarterbacks. So Kenfield's got a little bit of finagling to do to get his team in tip-top shape here. What he does have is pretty good matchups for Odell Beckham Jr. facing the worst Chicago defense and a very horrible secondary for wide receivers. So he should be able to put up some pretty decent points. They're projecting for him 19.7. He's been scoring about 19 points a week, so that seems fair. But against a really bad defense, he could actually put up a little bit more. Duke Johnson, who's been pretty good, is facing the 30th defense in Pittsburgh there. So, just looking at these things, the obvious answer is Brandon has a better team, and I think he's going to win. So, obviously, I'm going to pick Brandon to win this week. Kenfield has a lot of work he has to do to get his team in tip-top shape. After he tweaks his team and after he hits the waiver wire a little bit, maybe he'll have a better chance. But given everything he has here, given what's available on the waiver wire, I just think that Brandon is going to have a better week, especially now that he's motivated to win for his new son, Logan. So I think that Brandon, you're going to be able to celebrate your son's birth with a victory in fantasy this week, which I know is like one of the best things in life because you're so fucking good at this that it's just got to be awesome. So anyways, let's go on to the next game, Noel. Feel free to rip me a new one here.
I was going to say, off the bat, this one looks like a tough matchup for you here, Mike. However, when you dig a little bit deeper, apart from the fact that Charlie, what the fuck am I talking about? Tyler has a very favorable matchup with Ben Roethlisberger going against that, as we've talked about ad nauseum, horrible, deplorable Cleveland defense. I think that could be a big game. But then again, Tom Brady against a very bad San Francisco defense. And this is why I make the case that it might be closer than you think. Doug Martin is hopefully back to full strength this week. However, against the number 1 defense in the league in Kansas City. Yes, you've got Ty Montgomery right now starting at running back, Mike, but and same with Jordy Nelson at wide receiver. But is Aaron Rodgers going to get pissed off and go off? And are the Packers going to have a huge week? If so, Washington's defense, despite Josh Norman, is a good place to start. Greg Olsen against a very bad New Orleans defense. I like that. Delaney Walker, though, is just a silent assassin. Could do some bad things. But then again, you're also hamstrung by Julian Edelman on Tyler's team. But I think I'm going to call this one. I think this is too close to call because Allen Robinson has been kind of back recently, mostly due to garbage time points. Jamison Crowder against basically guys off the street from Green Bay on your team. So he should put up some big points. Dolphins defense special teams is a good pickup, Mike, because they've been on fire recently. And I think Jared Goff is due for a baptism by fire this week with that. And Vinatieri second. He'd probably be number 1 kicker ranked if he just hadn't had a bye week recently. On paper, if you just look at it, this looks like it's Tyler's game to lose, but there are a lot of favorable matchups for you, and if things fall into place, could go well. As where with Tyler, he's going to need to have his big-name guys have some good games against some tough matchups. So, as I said, I'm going to go with too close to call on this one, but it could get ugly either way, I think.
I think you're right. I don't know what to do with Ty Montgomery. Showing my hand here because he seems like he should be a pretty darn good play considering he's kind of, if you look at it, ESPN actually has him eligible as a wide receiver and a running back. However, with that sickle cell illness, I just don't know. I'm not a doctor. I don't know how to – I understand football physical injuries a little bit more, but I don't understand the medicine behind sickle cell. So I'm like, should I start him? Should I put in Ray Rice? No, I shouldn't do that. But what should I? There's And a lot of question marks. I honestly, I agree with you. I think your assessment was spot on. I don't know who's going to win this week. It looks like it's Tyler's game to lose. So there's got to be. It'll be interesting. This will be one of the fun games to watch. So let's go to Charles and Vanessa, who are battling it out for the Pacific Conference title. Charlie's got a pretty solid lead at 6-4 versus her 4-6. Now, looking at their teams, I think this is Vanessa's week. I really do. She's projected to get 136 to his 115. The question is DeMarco Murray going to play? He is questionable as of right now and was held out of practice today, Wednesday, with a toe injury. So, I don't know. It's going to be difficult to say. What's very challenging about analyzing Charlie's team is the inconsistency of his scoring. You look at that point scored by week at the very bottom of the projections, and Vanessa's consistently putting up 130 plus. We alluded to that earlier in the podcast. Charlie is all over the map. He's really kind of shooting all over the place here. So it's difficult to say where Charlie's going to lie this week. I think that, to your point, Noel, Aaron Rodgers he's got to be pissed. The Packers look like shit this year. So you think he'd want to just go out there and just, no pun intended, throw down a lot of points. Like really just stick it to the Redskins because the Packers really need to start winning to at least be even whispered in playoff contention in the NFC North. So I think that he's going to have to start really kicking some ass, and that might motivate him to play well and put up a lot of points for Charlie. Where Charlie is facing a steep hurdle this week is that his top players, except for Isaiah Crowell, are facing a really tough defensive schedule here. And without Gronk, who's been a real kick-ass player, and without Julio Jones, the number one wide receiver so far this year, he's got a lot of points to make up that he could normally count on are not there. So Charlie's got a tough week ahead of him. Vanessa's less so. If DeMarco Murray plays, he'll be going against Indianapolis's 23rd ranked defense against running backs. So that would be a big help for her because with the average of 33 points, his production could certainly tip the game in her favor. She doesn't have a whole lot of difficult defenses to face this week. So I think that with that, and with the fact that Dak Prescott has officially the starting quarterback position with Dallas, I think that, well, that could go two ways. I think Dak Prescott has absolutely earned the right to be the Dallas quarterback. What I think might actually be a headwind for him is now that he's earned that right, is he going to play as hard? So I think that Fanny's got a tough week ahead of her, but she has a easier week than Charlie does. So I'm going to call this one for Vanessa. I think she's got enough upside with fewer obstacles in her way to win this week. Let's go to the next one. It's Josh and Courtney.
And with this game, being that both teams have two players that are on bye weeks, which they obviously will get to, but when I first look at this one, I want to go, who the fuck knows who's going to win this game? But when I look a little bit deeper, I think the deciding factor here will be Drew Brees, who, despite having a very bad defense, where Carolina has been good this season is on the defensive line and their linebackers. But New Orleans actually has a fairly good offensive line. So I think Drew Brees is poised to have another fantastic week here. I think he'll most likely live up to his average, if not above, of 33.7 points, opposed to that projection of 25.8. Carlos Hyde is interesting. I actually, Mike, had assumed that he got hurt, and that was why his production was so bad last week. I just read that was not the case. He just sucked. But as I encourage you all to look this up. I'd rather not go into this detail, but as Chris Collingsworth really burned the shit out of Bill Simmons this week, Bill Simmons did at least point out that New England's front seven is not all that great. So I think poised for a bounce-back week against New England here. However, DeAndre Hopkins, he's done. As long as Barack Hussein Osweiler is throwing him the ball, he's going to keep getting single digit games, and it's just awful. There's nothing Josh can do. It blows. And these are some big bye weeks too. Antonio Gates out, Matt Forte out, who surprisingly is number 5 amongst running backs in fantasy. But he does have Rashad Jennings, who had a good, solid week last week against a not too bad Cincinnati defense. Now going against a terrible Chicago defense. And I think Seattle's defense against Philadelphia would be a good matchup. He's got one of the best kickers in Justin Tucker. To Courtney's team here, this is one of these fun games where she's starting. Well, right now, she'll probably change this. I don't know if she will. Maybe not. Carson Wentz coming against the Seattle defense, so there's that struggle there. But then, as I mentioned before, Todd Gurley coming against a tough Miami defensive front, and Todd Gurley has no one blocking for him. Kelvin Benjamin, who really hasn't done anything since really the beginning of the start of the season. Jason Witten, who just Mr. Consistency at this point. Darius Thomas bye week. Randall Cobb, very disappointing. Chargers defense, surprisingly good, but on a bye week. Stephen Gostkowski, who I would have thought would have been higher ranked as a kicker this year at 20, but is poised to get you anywhere between 8 and 13 points. I just think that Drew Brees, as this is set up right now, will carry this game for Josh, and I like him so far. But I'm also going to say that who the fuck knows, because there's a lot of lineup changes that will likely happen before the games actually start.
And there you go. Let's wrap it up here at the last two. Noel going against Molly. Both of you are on a 2-game winning streak. Noel, this might sound weird. You're tied for second in the Pacific Conference. Molly's tied for first. I have to give this one to you, Noel. Even though Molly has 2 positions she needs to fill with a defense and a kicker there, I think that there's more positives for you than for Molly this week, simply because she has one of her best players, David Johnson, is going against a very stout Minnesota run defense. Minnesota has only twice this year allowed 100 yards or more to an opposing team on the ground. And most of the time, it's between 50 and 80 yards there. So I don't know. David Johnson has been unbelievable for her, putting up 33 points. He's in the realm of the same conversation you'd have with Melvin Gordon and DeMarco Murray. These guys are studs this year. Really awesome. And Ezekiel Elliott even. These guys are really awesome. So her best player going against a very difficult Minnesota defense could present a problem for her. She does have Matt Prater waiting in the wings, so add that to the list. That'll add 9 points to her. That'll take your line from 27, Noel, down to 18. So suck it. The thing is, she's just facing more difficult defenses on the whole, and I think that's going to make it harder for her to win. You do have a tough matchup in the sense that Russell Wilson is going against the 5th best in Philadelphia. However, he's not your best player. I mean, he's been putting up 22 points, which is respectable for a quarterback, but it's not a thing where you're like, shit, I need to get points out of Russell Wilson or else I'm not going to win. And not the case. And it's the same thing for Devonta Adams out of Green Bay. He's facing a very difficult Redskins defense, but he's not the thing that you really need. Lamar Miller he's your best player, I would argue, besides, Melvin Gordon and Martellus Bennett. Melvin, I think you'll be sorely missed his 30 points. So Lamar Miller has to perform, and I think he has the opportunity against Oakland's very bad run defense. They're 24th ranked overall, so you should have a golden opportunity to put up some points with Lamar Miller if Bill O'Brien doesn't start fucking shit up again in Houston, be like, it's first down, I better punt just to be safe. So I think that Lamar Miller should have a good game if all things play out like I'm expecting them to. Now, it's fantasy, so that might blow up in my face like a landmine. I think that picking up Martellus Bennett was a very smart move. I think that you got him today off the waiver wires, even though he's limited in practice today. And a slightly injured ankle is a heck of a lot better than a potentially punctured lung with Gronk. So I think that given the propensity for Brady to throw to his tight ends, Bennett should have a good game. So when you drop Bennett in instead of Tyler Eifert, although that might not affect the line that much, it will affect the outcome of the game, assuming Bennett plays. Eifert's going against the 14th ranked Buffalo defense, and as you mentioned earlier, San Francisco's defense is pretty shitty. And so they're 18th overall against receivers and tight ends. So I think Bennett should have a pretty good week. Noel, I'm going to call this one for you. I think that you've got more going for you. You've got an easier defensive matchup, and you've got better upside potential with your stud players. So I think you need a win, and you're going to win this week. If Molly loses, it's okay. It's really not the end of the world. At 7-4, she could still make the playoffs. In fact, I would argue she will make the playoffs because she's one of the only 2 7-3 teams. So everybody wants to win every week, not a question. But Nola, you need to win. So I think you've got that a little bit more hunger in you. And Molly, well, I'm sure she wants to. The desire to win is certainly there and powerful. She could afford to lose. She could afford to say, no one. All right, he had a great week. Fuck it. And still be able to make the playoffs. Making the playoffs is more important than anything else. 6 seeds, 5 seeds. These people have won the playoffs. You don't have to be the number 1 or 2 seed to make it to the playoffs. It's easier because you have a bye week the first week. But as long as you make the playoffs, so long as you're in the winner's circle, you are a contender for Mile High Champion. And all the glory that comes with it, you get the big trophy that you can mount wherever you want. You can display it as you see fit. You can strap it to the top of your car and drive around with it, although I wouldn't recommend that for legal purposes, and I really don't want you destroying our trophy. And then you get the glory that comes with being a Mile High Champion. Arguably the best fantasy football league that's ever existed in ever, anywhere in the universe of anything ever. So, all right, Noel, last game. Let's wrap this up here. Let's go with Ben and Larson. What do you think?
I think it's hard to not call this game for Ben. Matt Stafford back off of a bye week against I would say at best mediocre Jacksonville defense. Ezekiel Elliott does have a tough matchup against Baltimore this week, but until he proves otherwise, it's Ezekiel Elliott. So that's tough to beat. Brandon Cooks, as I said, against a Carolina defense with really no one in the secondary to stop him. Dennis Pitta has been very quietly putting up good numbers this year. LeGarrette Blount against, as we both of us have said, a bad San Francisco defense. And I don't know how the fuck Ben pulled this off, but Spencer Ware, who's now back against a bad Tampa Bay defense, and then Patriots defense against San Francisco offense should be solid. Dan Bailey should be a good start. But there's some things to like about Larson's team here. It doesn't have a kicker going yet, which who cares? But I would imagine he'll make some adjustments here. Marcus Mariota against a bad Indianapolis defense. You like that? LaShawn McCoy he had a good week last week and supposed to be even better this week against Cincinnati defense, which should be better than they are, but aren't. But then you go to Jarvis Landry against a LA Rams defense, which is actually fairly decent. They just are on the field so often that they don't tend to look that good. But it's tough to see him doing anything after he hasn't done anything all season, except for the first couple of games. Zach Miller against a New York Giants defense, which looked dominant on Monday night. So that could be tough. Theo Riddick, who the hell knows? He's kind of up and down between the injury and the fact that he's also kind of more of a PPR monster when it comes to running back. Robert Kelly, who I had not heard of, but I assume is the, third string running back at this point for the Redskins. Could be an interesting start. I do like the Rams defense against Miami, but, I just think Ben's team is, as always, too much to overcome for most people this season, and I like him. I look forward to seeing what kind of roster magic Larson pulls off, and again, my hat's off to him this season, and we talked about this at length. But Larson, I'm afraid that Ben and his Castle Black Night's watch will be too much for you this weekend, and Ben will prevail.
Ben will prevail, and I agree. R. Kelly, or Robert Kelly, when I saw that name, I was like, so he gave me that toot, and then we gave that beep. I'm like, no, he's going to peel over the field. Watch out. So that's yeah. Anytime I hear any R named Kelly, that's exactly where my mind goes, and to Dave Chappelle, who made his debut back on, this will be very topical, made his debut back on Saturday Night Live last week, and boy, he's still hilarious. So let's thank you, Noel. That wraps up the previews. We're just going to conclude with the poll of the week and then go to Huddle Up. The poll of the week is looking at the top 5 players so far through week 10. Who do you think is the favorite for season MVP? Going from number 1 to number 5 is DeMarco Murray, Ezekiel Elliott, Matt Ryan, David Johnson, or Drew Brees. Which one of those 5 do you think is going to, by the end of the season, be the MVP? Now, let's go to the final part of tonight, the Huddle Up with Big Nolski, and we will wrap it up. Noel, tonight's topic, I think you can be particularly share your wisdom with everyone, because it's about the offensive line. And there's a lot that, the celebrity positions get covered the most. Quarterbacks, wide receivers, running backs, and cornerbacks on the defense with guys like Richard Sherman. You hear a lot about these guys that make the press a lot. Tight ends as well, but not as much. But those are the celebrity positions. But to allow these guys to perform the way they do is a whole support staff of folks, the logistical team of sorts, to a military analogy, that helps them perform on the front lines the way that they do, and that is the offensive line. Let's talk about the different positions and their roles and responsibilities. We're going to talk about the 3 big ones for right now. That's the center, the guards, and the tackles. Let's start with the center. I think most people understand what the center is, but talk more about what is his job and what are his responsibilities.
All right. Well, before we get started, just to add to what you were saying, when I played football from the very beginning, the first thing that you hear from your coaches is, especially on the offensive side of the ball, that the quarterback and the other offensive players are the steering wheel, but the offensive line is the engine. And if the engine isn't working, the car's not going anywhere. And that, if you watch the Vikings, for example, that is very true. If you've got a shoddy engine, it's just not going to work. And to take the analogy a step further, you have to have basically all pistons firing at the same time. And the offensive line, in a way, yes, the rest of the positions kind of have to act in concert with each other. But as an offensive lineman, you really have to not only work together, but have a feeling for what everyone else around you is going to do. So it takes both verbal and nonverbal communication and just that familiarity with each other. So that being said, the center is, they always say this is the quarterback of the line, which in some cases is true, but in other cases, for example, the Patriots, is not true. Tom Brady actually calls out all of the offensive line protections and shifts that they do. That is fairly uncommon, but it's kind of grown as he's done it more. Usually the center does that. We talked about this, the defense, where you always hear this on television where someone will shout out, number so-and-so is the mic, and that is what the blocking scheme is based off of. And typically that's the center is going to yell at. So if a certain player who's with middle linebacker we talked about, I think week 1 maybe, if the middle linebacker is playing either to the right or the left of the center, or if we want to do this, if they're playing to the left, right or the left, or if they play the left A gap or the right A gap, that shows where every player needs to block. And the center, for the most part, is probably your worst offensive lineman. Not to be mean, but they're usually the smallest and the most unathletic, and they're rarely ever going to be left alone to unblock anybody. The next position is the guard, who plays to the left and the right of the center. Oh, I should mention also the center is the one who always snaps the ball to the quarterback. In the guard's case, they're what's we call interior linemen, and they're most likely than not either going to be helping out the center, blocking somebody else. They might one up somebody on the other side, but those guys are very, very important, mostly in the running or the running game, because they're going to open holes, the eight gaps we talked about. Then to their outside is the tackles. The right tackle is, you always hear about the hog mollies or run grader, and is usually a bigger guy who can really move people off the point of attack, off the ball, but maybe not be the most athletic guy. As the left tackle, which is the money position on the line, is the guy who's usually your most athletic and maybe not the biggest, but usually the tallest and has the longest arms of any offensive lineman. And they're the ones that are expected to protect the quarterback's quote-unquote blind side. And that's why it's really the money position there. And what else would you like to know from here, Michael?
The final position, I guess you're going to cover the tackles, but that's I guess I'm laughing to myself because while you're talking about the offensive line, I was looking up. Do you remember the play the Colts ran a couple years ago with I think it was Griff?
Yep, Griff
Whalen. Yep, I'm gonna post that picture online. This is how you don't run an offensive line. The Patriots just absolutely murdered this guy. It's fucking hilarious. Just go to the page and watch it. So, no, that is it. I appreciate you covering everything here, Noel. That's kind of the important things we've talked about. Aspects of the offensive line in the past, specifically the gaps and all that kind of stuff. There's one more thing I want you to touch on, and the Raiders had 6 on the front line, and I think they put an actual lineman in. But how does the tight end work into an offensive line scheme?
So, from a historical aspect, the tight ends were really never a thing. What they were called was an end. And how that came about is, and you should watch them if you can, is old tapes of Mike Ditka. They were only for blocking. And it was usually, as you just talked about, Mike, it was they wanted an extra lineman in there. And usually that guy was not as big and as strong as the other guys. So they were just brought in to block and usually out in the linebacker. But Mike Ditka in particular served a huge purpose as far as the evolution of how tight ends do. He was an incredible blocker, but he was also a good athlete who catch the ball, and he could seriously watch highlights of him from when he first started with the Bears. He just would kill people running after the catch. But yeah, I mean, Jimmy Graham is kind of a tight end that's known for not being much of a blocker, but then you have tight ends that are known for being nothing but blockers. And a lot of those, and even in fact, a lot of tight ends who were maybe play tight end in college have now become pro left tackles or right tackles. And those guys are oftentimes meant to set the edge. Watch Jason Witten play, and he will match up on a strong side linebacker or even a strong side defensive end and just drive him back. So tight end is they're great receiving. Good tight end is a great receiving threat, but is usually just traditionally an extra blocker who is athletic enough to handle typically a linebacker, but the great ones can also line up against linemen, which is really difficult.
There you go. That makes a difference, especially if you need a little extra yardage. You want to have a little bit stronger defensive wall in front of them. So at any rate, Noel, thank you. I appreciate your insights. I thought you'd have some pretty fantastic insights. Go to the front page, everyone, if you want to see that hilarious image of Griff Whalen just getting rocked by the Patriots defense on what was one of the dumbest plays called in football history. Thank you, Noel. I'm going to say it. Always going to say it. I appreciate you spending time with me and with us tonight to help record this and to put out there into fantasy land your wisdom and knowledge and insight on the game. So thank you so much. Is there anything else you want to share with anyone tonight?
I think that's it. I appreciate that having the opportunity, and thank you all for listening. And go Broncos!
Do. Yeah.